Hello, everyone. This is another Black Conservative. I'm Ryan Boland. Thank you all for joining me. Comedian Marlon Wayans has come out swinging against the woke mindedness of a lot of people who have basically gotten so sensitive that you can't make a joke without them crying and boo-hooing. That's basically what he said in essence. And he had some pretty strong words to say about this. And I did a video on this same topic some months ago. Dave Chappelle made the same accusation that people are so sensitive now that you can't even crack a legitimate joke without someone getting upset and wanting to protest. So let's see what Marlon Wayans had to say here. Actor and comedian Marlon Wayans came out swinging against cancel culture for his strong stranglehold on comedy and the censorship of jokes. Wayans, who got his start on In Living Color and the Wayans brothers in the 1990s, hit against cancel culture in an interview with BuzzFeed that centered on his 2004 movie White Chicks, which featured him and his brother Sheen in whiteface as two undercover FBI agents. And if anyone knows the Wayans brothers and the Wayans family, period, and have watched Living Color, I grew up watching In Living Color. I'm going to get into that in detail. That was an hilarious show, okay? But let's go on. If you grew up watching any of that, you knew how funny they were. He says, I don't know what planet we're on where you think people don't need laughter and that people need to be censored and canceled. If a joke is going to get me canceled, thank you for doing me that favor. It's sad that society is in this place where we can't laugh anymore, he said. Wayans denounced, quote, this D generation, presumably Generation X, as a bunch of, quote, scared ASS people. I mean, and he's right. I mean, he's using terms that are pretty rough, but he's right. But inevitably, this leads to the question as to why people are so scared. I'll get into that. I ain't listening to these folks. These scared A people, these scared executives, you all do what you want to do. Great. I'm still going to tell my jokes the way I tell them, he said. And if you want to make some money, jump on board. And if not, then I'll find a way to do it myself. I know my audience, he added. My audience comes to my shows every weekend and they leave feeling great and laughing. One thing about the Wayans, we've always told the worst joke the best way. And I like the way he put that. White Chicks has been a lightning rod for controversy ever since the concept of blackface became a national conversation in 2018 when anchor Megyn Kelly defended it as a matter of costume. Marlon Wayans defended the film in an interview with Entertainment Weekly in 2020, saying that, quote, white chicks love the movie most of all. Hey, this is funny here. He says, you know who love white chicks the most? White chicks. That's how you know it's a good movie. A good joke in comedy is when the people you make fun of laugh the loudest, he said. And what's beautiful is that we're equal opportunity offenders. It was a great exploration of gender, of race, of pop culture, and done with kid gloves so everybody could laugh. And I think that's what makes it a cult classic to this day. And that's the end of the article there. And that's so true. You know, it's sad that we've gotten to the point now where you cannot tell a joke. You can't say anything that's going to offend anyone or anything like that. But getting back to the Wayans brothers, the Wayans family, if you will. I grew up in the 1990s watching In Living Color. I watched, I didn't see White Chicks, but I did watch, what's that comedy, sketch comedy, something in the hood with your juice or something like that. There's a long title. I watched that. I watched, what was this other movie that came out in the Scary Movies, Scary Movie 1 and 2. After that, I didn't watch my other, but the Wayans brothers were involved in Scary Movies 1 and 2. Had me laughing till my stomach was hurting. Hilarious, zany comedy. And I loved it, you know, and there was a lot of things in it that was kind of like, oh my goodness, cross the line and so forth, or what you would consider to be crossing the line, but it was hilarious. It was hilarious. And I agree with him on that. I agree with him on it. It's like, why are people so scared today? Why are these people so, you talking about, like back in the days, you can't talk about what they call little people now. They used to call them back in the days, they used to call them the N word. I ain't going to say it here, but back in the days, you used to call them the N word. Okay. M. Okay. But now you got to call them little people. Why? Because everybody's offended now. So when people get offended, what do? They start forming these groups and little cliques, and then going to the government or going into some type of think tank for financing to support their group because they need to fight for their rights. So you got all these people and all these different little cliques. All this stuff is a Marxist design. I'm not going to get into the Marxist concept because y'all know I talk about that a lot. All this stuff is by design, keeping everybody disunified and separated into their own little world. And I'm better than you and you worse than me. It's a bunch of nonsense. But this leads to the question that I have asked before is, why is it that people are so sensitive today? And I believe, and when he mentions Generation X, I believe it's by design. If you keep most people in these groups that I just mentioned, whether they be gay or little people or big people or whatever, back in the days, you may have had some people that got offended by it and so forth, but they would basically get offended and then they would go on with their life. It wasn't like some big deal where they felt like they wanted to commit suicide or whatever. They knew these were jokes. These were jokes. Okay. They knew that and they laughed and they may have got a little offended, but they laughed and they went on about their lives. Right now, what is happening is people are being conditioned to be sensitive. They're being conditioned by the Marxists. They got to bring that back up. The Marxist infiltrators are conditioning people to be sensitive. They shouldn't say stuff like that about you. They shouldn't say these kind of things about you. That's very offensive. They're being very insensitive. So people start feeding into that. Yeah, they're right. Yeah, they are being very insensitive. They feed into that rhetoric. They feed into that nonsense. Next thing you know, they start protesting and hammering comedians for saying offensive things on stage. And then they start forming their own little cliques and forming their own little groups. And now comedians who really want to be comedians can't say anything now. So now it's like, and it's crazy because a lot of these comedians today, are they really being honest about being comedians? Are they really being honest with themselves? Are they really being honest about the sketches they do? Are they really being honest? Because sometimes when I watch, I don't really watch these comedians per se, but when I watch little bits and snippets of it, I'm saying to myself, that's not what you really wanted to say. You really wanted to say this, but you didn't say that because you didn't want to offend anybody. So you held your peace. You held it down. You kind of suppressed it, And I'm led to ask, are these comedians really being honest with themselves? So now they got to edit this out and edit that out, and they got to watch everything they say. And it's almost to the point where you don't know what to laugh at. You don't know what to laugh at. If I laugh at this, it might offend that group. If I laugh at that, it might offend that group. So I don't want to laugh at the wrong thing. This is just another Marxist attempt to keep everybody divided. I believe the Marxists have made people oversensitive to the point where they can't take anything. They've become what is commonly known among the conservative groups as snowflakes, because you can easily melt. That's what a snowflake is. It easily melts. You comes in, you see the snowflake, and if it's real fluffy, it just easily melt. No big deal. And that's how people are. They can easily melt like the wicked rich of the West. I'm melting. You offended me. I'm melting. You said the wrong things about me. I'm melting. That's how they are. They like melting snowflakes. They like the wicked rich of the West. You're melting based on a joke that you took to heart. So I hope and pray that one day we will really get comedians that are going to be true comedians. And let me say this in the summarizing of the video. It's not always about, in my opinion, it's not always about crossing the line or being controversial as a comedian per se. And what I mean by that is a lot of times people think being a comedian is a cussing, hooping, hollering, and cussing all the time. It's not always about cussing, but it can be sometimes about, if you really want to really be a comedian, like be an honest comedian, sometimes it mentions things that may be unpopular or rather politically incorrect. Okay, well, that's politically incorrect. Well, sometimes that's what it may take. You know, people like Moms Mabley, Red Fox, Richard Pryor, you know, mainly Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, you know, all of those comedians today, man, they'd be canceled today big time. They'd be canceled today big time. But back then, people didn't, but they weren't pooting and snotting and acting, oh man, I want to commit suicide. I want to slit my wrist and slit my throat because you talked about how I was overweight and I was fat. You talked about because I was gay. They didn't, a lot of them probably laughed at it. Like they laughed at it. They laughed at it. They may have had a little stinging a little bit, but then at the most part, they laughed at it. They didn't take it home with them. They didn't take it home. Oh my God, and take it home with them and wet their pillow with tears because of something some comedian said on stage that offended them. You know, it's like, come on, man. But that's what's going on, and I'm glad that that Marlon here he stood up for what he believed in. Hopefully, you know, it won't get to the point where they try to just destroy him. I don't know how well he's doing at this point. The article doesn't really give all the details about that. But it seems to me that he's doing pretty successful. He may not be on the same level as these other top comedians are today, you know, but they're not saying anything. They're not saying anything that's really all that controversial. They're cussing. All the cuss. Every other word is a cuss word. How is that really? That's not controversial. That's just you just got to feel you need to cuss in every line that you say. That's different if it's funny. Now, if it's funny, like Richard Pryor or Eddie Murphy, they cussed a lot, but they were funny. A lot of these comedians today, the ones that do cuss, they're not funny. You just sound like, in my opinion, most of them just sound like people off the street that feel like, hey, it's funny if you just say a whole bunch of cuss words. F this, F that, suck my D, and they consider that funny. Man, come on. You're not Richard Pryor. You're not Eddie Murphy, okay? Come up with a more, viable comedy sketch than just cussing, But that's just my opinion, and I'm ranting. But I agree with him on his. What do you guys think? Leave your comment in the comment section below. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel. God bless you all, and see you again.